Hi, I'm Jeremiah. Welcome to Up at Night. This podcast is all about learning from thought leaders, academics, and professionals based on one fundamental question. What keeps you up at night? Hey everyone, welcome to Up at Night. I'm thrilled to be joined by Phil Kyprianou today. Phil is the founder of GothRider, now Coffee, but you're going to hear about his story. It's a very interesting one. It's a powerful example of how a brand can evolve and adapt over time to achieve remarkable success. Phil, thank you so much for joining me today, and I want to jump right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey of the brand GothRider, and how did you end up selling coffee?
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me today. Basically, GothRider started out of nowhere back in 2015. At that time, I was working at Ivanco as a head of strategy, marketing strategy and digital strategy. And at night, I was selling like t-shirts for fun. And through that journey, it went like so great that I decided to go full-time into e-commerce. And dropshipping was around the corner at that time. Like it was an early start, let's say, before the craze of 2017-18. So I was just like before the wave, and started like selling a bunch of stuff randomly. I had a Shopify store, and all in that store, I mean, it was like random products targeting like multiple niches, like from law enforcement, firefighters, nurses, people doing bikes, to people doing camping, and a bunch of stuff, So it was really, really random. And one thing I found out through that journey is like, at that point is there was like a specific product for everyone, but the store was, a bunch of random. So if nurses came in, they will see like things that were not relatable to them. And that's where I started to figure out, okay, now I need to have a store by niche. And basically I had one for nurses, firefighters, etc., and bikers actually as well, like people that loves like skulls, bikes, and things like that. And that's basically how GothRider started. There was no intent of being a brand or anything else. We were just selling a bunch of random stuff on that store, up to a point that, it's starting like to sell well. I mean, I see also that the customers are really loyal compared to the other niche, and they're coming back. And that's where I decided like to say, okay, I'm gonna, focus only on that, stop doing all the other niches, and just running GothRider. And in a couple of months, we reach actually our first 7 figures on selling online, and that was crazy. But all this craziness bring a lot of stuff that I was not prepared of. So starting with dropshipping from China is at least like 20 to 30 days. And you get like customers that are starting getting angry because, they're not receiving their stuff in time. So we had to figure out a way. So one way was to have our own warehouse in the United States. So we opened our first warehouse in Texas, and starting like bringing the best sellers at least to that warehouse to sell those things to the customers at a faster shipping time than from China. So we couldn't keep actually like the warehouse couldn't keep up. It was a small family-owned warehouse. So we had to move to a bigger one in Atlanta, and challenges also comes in. Understanding that the shipping price, even like the economic of the dropshipping versus like, okay, now I have to pay an extra dollars for shipping. We cannot sell the same price than we were doing. We had to readjust up to going back to the drop shipping only model. And that, like, I think that I drove that like for about like 2 years, up until I found out like, okay, now there's more drop shipper in the business. There's more competitors, and there's even like competitors that are copying not only the same products, but the same website. So we got our brand ripped off like completely. We had to do like a DMCA takedown and all this kind of thing. And now I found out like, okay, now, I'm selling like everything that everyone, there's nothing that does differentiate ourselves from everyone else. So I have like to figure out what we're going to do with that website actually, because like I said, I mean, that was not really a brand. And I decided like, okay, if I'm going to go that route, I have like to do a couple of things. First, trademark GothRider. So that was one of the first thing I did. Invest a lot of money, getting in multiple categories, and as well, because we were selling, all over the world, I had like to find out where we would trademark. So we started like trademarking in Europe, England, United States, and Canada in
That's a
multiple
valid point
categories.
to bring here. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start, don't think about protecting their IP. And it's one of the most valuable things. So thanks for bringing that up. It's really an important way, yeah.
And we found out later. I will tell you about one thing a bit later regarding that. So, through that point, I had a passion for jewelry actually, and I mean I found that passion through selling, jewelry, and I found out like they're able to do that in Asia, cheap things and all this kind of thing. So we started like looking locally here to see what was possible, and I found out that there is very big jewelry and artisan jewelers community in Montreal, and I started networking, doing like the first test, first piece of jewelry and all this kind of thing here, up to building like a complete set, I would say, of artisan that will work with us, and finally, because of that, we had also to review our pricing, because we couldn't sell any more like $35-$60 like piece of jewelry. It has to be higher end. So we started position ourselves in the mid high end market, selling anything from $300 to $1,500, and that went great until the pandemic happened, and that's where we had to review again our old business model, because it was not sustainable the way we did it. And there's also another thing that came in, is the economic behind, acquiring customers at that price point is not the same game as, $30 to $60, customers when they spend for jewelry. And the other thing also, there's not as much recurrent customers that are coming, because once they buy, let's say, their engagement ring for their girl, I mean, they might not come probably for the next 2 years, even if they spend like $1,000, So acquiring those customers were expensive, and at the same time, pandemic came, changed the whole business model. We started like, it's ripped off like our business. So I had like to figure out what I was going to go for, and I was thinking for a while, I need to get absolutely into like that recurring model, finding like consumable goods, consumable products that it made sense for a business. So in those consumables and, something that was tied to our customers, there was like supplements, because a lot of our customers were going to the gym, getting in shape. There was cosmetics, because women's actually, there's no really brand for cosmetics actually, like in that world, except like Kat Von D maybe, but there's not others that are doing that. So we've seen also an opportunity there. And there was like coffee, and at that point, I was also like doing consulting for other brands, and one of those brands was a big coffee roaster in Montreal, and we became friends. And actually, during the pandemic, I told them about my idea. I said, we just survey our customers. They're interested into getting a coffee. I'm also like passionate about coffee. So maybe there's something we can do. And they said, yes, right away, Phil, we're going to help you on that. I mean, you're helping us, so we're going to help you. And within like 6 weeks, I did like a full rebrand, starting selling the coffee. I think like we're like pandemic hit like March 15, end of April, we were already starting selling like the coffee, So, and that grew very good. At certain point, we're selling, we sold like in a few months, like over tons of coffee. And now we entered in another challenge, is the growth, the hype, managing like things we were not even like in the economic way. So the thing is funny is like I've managed like higher end jewelry, which is higher cost. Now you have to work on very smaller margins because coffee has not the same kind of margins than, let's say, jewelry. So we grew fast, but it was another game because of cash flow also. So like the time we got in, and things started like to do good. Black Friday came in, Christmas came in. We had like a record month right away. But after that, it fell, So like January, was slower than the others. So we had like to manage a new way of cash that was not, it was not part of what I've learned before. So that created like I would not say like stress the first year, but the second year, higher stress. We went to the market to try to raise money, and beginning of 2023 and end of 22 was the worst time when we started that. Actually, Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt. A lot of VC started to pulling their dollars off, especially CPG. And now, even in the VC world, there's barely no one investing in CPG products right now. So it has been really hard. So we had to do, I had to take a step back, even thinking, am I going to do that again? We went to the market even to try to sell the business. We had an offer. We had, at that point when we had the offer, I decided, I might have the means to continue and figure out a way to do it. So went full restructuring the business. And after that storm, I was able to rebuild actually everything. And now we're more healthy than we used to be. That's a good thing. 18 months ago, we also signed a deal to get into retail with now 220 points of sales around Quebec, investing much more also locally. So also that's a good thing because I've seen the effect between spending a lot of cash around Canada and United States. At a certain point, we had 40% of our sales coming from United States. But now just having that focus, because the retail helped us, actually pushed us to have that focus, investing locally and seeing now the effect that everything we put as is positive compared to what it used to be and more healthier. So now we're in a good path for growth. And I would say next step is putting the pillars in place here in Quebec, attacking Ontario and the rest of Canada, and then later on going back to the US. So that's the whole story.
Well, it's an amazing story because I think it's probably the best example I've known so far of pivoting while remaining true to yourself and loyal to your customer base. Because the one thing that is following you throughout that whole crazy story is your consumers. They love the brand. They love the association they have with the brand. And it's at this point, it's crazy, but it's almost irrelevant what you sell because your brand is just so strong. You picked a niche from a branding standpoint, and you've been able to develop a conversation with these people, a way very few business I know were able to. So talking about the pandemic a bit, yes, it shifted a lot of things around, and you fell into consumer goods. What are the biggest lessons you were talking a little bit about that cash flow perspective and the misconception a lot of younger entrepreneurs have about starting a business that sells goods in general? What was your biggest learning there?
I think the biggest learning lessons is you build whatever, you spend in marketing or whatsoever, even if you have the biggest budget, that will not make an effect as if you can stand out a long term. Because the only thing that affects people in terms of reminding and associating themselves to a brand is time. So even if you have the smallest budget, but you go through 20 years, you have a better chance of getting people know about you and remembers about you. You can have like the best budget, spending dollars to the Super Bowl for one time or two time. Actually, I mean, and 3 years later, you can go bankrupt and just close your business. Nobody's gonna remember you compared to a business that is spending steady, going, try to do like slowly but surely and go through the time. This will have the best effect. So one thing I've got, I was part of those people actually that believe like, scale fast, grow your number as big as possible to prove that there's a market and all this kind of thing. Try to sell or what will raise money. But actually, that was a false representation of just a very, very small part of what is really happening on the success side of business. Because the real business that have success, there's actually a lot of them that you've never heard before or never heard in your life or you will never heard, but they're probably the best one, the one that have been as the best longevity and are the most profitable one. So it's better, to sometimes just go slowly, build your community, build your customer base, even if it's B2B or B2C, doesn't matter. But doing like slowly but surely, put the pillars in place and just don't care about the noise, that is going around because this is, most of the time, it's fake.
And I think that point you bring here was a wake-up call post-pandemic for a lot of businesses, a lot of zombie businesses that were surviving on investment. And I totally agree with that. A business should be something that, okay, maybe in the short term, you can't turn a profit because you have to invest, you're in a competitive market. But your goal should be to have an autonomous entity that will survive and prevail through time. I totally agree with that. Now, you're in a very competitive market with razor-thin margin. So what would be your secret sauce to gain market share as an underdog? Because probably a lot of people are like, oh, I would like to start a business in this industry, but it's so crowded and I'm going after Nestle and I'm going after Coke and after... How do you do that?
I think that the biggest advantage we have at GothRider is we don't have boundaries. As long as it's respectful in the way we do it, we can do almost everything. The big businesses, and I've been working in those big businesses, are boats. You cannot do anything without getting in a probation, making sure the lawyers verify something. There's like multiple layers that everything is scrutinized to make sure that, okay, we don't get backlash or anything. If I get a backlash, I don't even care, at a certain point, because I see that as a way of getting known. And because we were bad at it, we can take anything and turn that into something good, actually. That's my philosophy about the brand. And that's how I'm able to probably move in the more, I would say, competitive space than a lot of people that are in, and especially in coffee. There's so much. There's so much brands creating their own boundaries there for multiple reasons. Like could be for the brand part, to who they think they are talking to, or even for the product itself. Because actually, the coffee right now is transforming. It's not what it used to be like 50 or 100 years ago. It's much more getting into the, I would say, breweries or even like wine, angle. And a lot of the micro roaster, they're doing a fantastic job, but sometimes they keep themselves in those very, very small, boundaries, which doesn't allow them to, I would say, to expand or to talk to a wider customership. So what I did this year is think about how we can position ourselves while we respect everything the micro roasters does, because it's where I would say I call it the lab, because they are doing like the work at creating those new, I would say, notes or new way of tasting the coffee. And you have like the industrial guys, like all the brands that we know and we drink of. However, but there's no one in the middle. There's no one. So because we have no boundaries, and because we are, I think we can be a wider appeal from, and I don't say that because I think of it, because now, because I'm going on the field, meeting people, I see my customers, the range of, I talk to them, and I see, I mean, we are the bridge between industrial coffee and micro roasters. We're going to do the link of bringing those people, taking market shares of Folgers, Maxwell House, and all this kind of thing. Put that in our, I would say...
it's almost like a branding machine, you know?
It's a branding machine, but it's also education machine.
Yeah.
Because our goal is like to take them from what they used to drink and an industry that hasn't changed like for 50 years and more, I would say, but giving them all the information they need to enjoy what it is real good coffee, and then they can continue to live with us. But what we want to do is like also to bring them to micro roaster, you know? So it's
the
like
education part, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a bridge. So we don't see ourselves as a competition. That's another thing, is like, I mean, only in Quebec there's over like 400 roaster, like, and all of us are not fighting. I mean, we should not fight against each other. We should fight against the industrial, actually. So this is our competitor. It's not like the micro roaster of coffee in the corner, you know, of our street. Actually, we have to educate to bring them to show what is good coffee, actually, and enjoy that instead of the industrial one. So that's how we position ourselves. I mean, starting this year, that's how I decided to position ourselves, because I see this is where there's a market need, and to just as a reminder, that's why also it's easier for us because we don't have boundaries. But the smaller have boundaries, so it's going to be very hard to do transitioning from for customers that are used to industrial coffee to micro roasting coffee.
Yeah, changing habits is always a challenge, but I agree with you. In any given industry, it's a misconception to think the other small player that tries to make the industry better is the real challenger.
Exactly.
It's the big guy out there that want to maintain status quo, that is an operational monster to reduce the cost as much as possible, that usually keeps an industry dormant.
Yeah.
And I agree. Everybody that work with smaller entrepreneur should, on the contrary, try to make the industry emerge and reinvent itself, because ultimately the customer benefits from it. So that's a great message you push out there, Phil. So GothRider obviously take most of your time, but you're also someone very involved within the marketing community. And I've seen you helping so many brands. One thing that amazed me is always the level of strategic thinking and resilience you have. How do you keep that level of energy? Do you sleep at night?
I think even when I'm sleeping, I'm thinking. So there's something going on at the same time. I think I'm just passionate. I think that's it. I'm passionate about strategizing, marketing, brands, and all this kind of thing. So it's almost it's almost natural at a certain point, you know. So it's part of my life. And each time I see something or brand or something new, I just try to understand, you know, the whole thing going on behind the scene. I mean, there's like even like something like very specific like that came out like recently about, you know, live shopping and all this kind of trends that it's starting slowly. But, you know, I was like looking at those brands that are doing that, and I'm trying to, you know, instantly I'm trying to reverse engineer understand like the customer behaviors behind and all this kind of thing. So it's getting to a point that it's part of me. It's even me now, you know, that's the thing. So I cannot go beside or left or right. It's there.
And it puts you probably in a position where you're less afraid than most people of taking risk, pushing the boundary. And I would like to have your opinion on where's the limit for usually an entrepreneur between not taking enough risk and just wasting time and efforts taking too much of it because the market is just not ready.
That's a very good point, actually. When you should stop or when you should move to another project. It's a mix of gut and data, because I won't lie, a lot of people told me at a certain point, when it was hard, and, Phil, it's okay if you stop, you will be probably happier like doing something else, maybe. But when you look at the data and you look, data and the trends and the positioning and also the feedback of the customers, that's where, it pushes you to go further, And sometimes it's just a matter of time, because everyone's going to tell you anyway, longer you are in the game, better you're getting, and better at a certain point, it's going to happen. If you stop too early, it won't happen. Never. That's why also you have a lot of people, that are just, launching business over business over business. They don't stick to one. And that was my problem, actually, at a certain point. When I started like 20, 25 years ago, I had like multiple business and I was not sticking long enough. You need focus, and that's part also of the thing we talk at the early, how I pivot. I did that pivot, to over and over. That's part of the process. As long as you stick to, let's say, your niche, you can evolve. You think about Nintendo. Nintendo was selling like playing cards, like random stuff. Now it's huge. We can talk about the Samsung, LG, and all those. They were not even like selling cell phones. They were into washing machines and car shop and things like that. Nothing to do with electronic. They did multiple changes through the years to adapt themselves. And I think that's the part of a business as well, is to be able to adapt through the ages. And that's how it grows. It's like anyone. Imagine, if you're a human and you only do like one thing is writing. Great. You're going to be a good writer probably, and you're going to be like very specialized. But you might think of at a certain point, okay, why not writing for a movie? Why not writing for something else? Because I'm getting like those extra skills. But some people will do always the same thing, but some will be able to evolve through the time. So why this would not apply also to business? I think that it's both.
And it's true, because what we were talking about earlier about the Super Bowl ads, for example. And I invite anybody who's watching right now, take brands from the last, 30 years, whichever were having an ad on the Super Bowl. A lot of them are not there anymore. And there's massive brands that didn't pivot in time and had all the reason in the world to be as big as Apple. I'm thinking of BlackBerry, for example. There's so many brands out there, like you said, that we were thinking were so solid, but then the market shifts, the consumer habits shift, and they just don't follow. And that's the beginning of the end. And I think what you did is just an amazing example of following the customer, staying true to what you care about, and pivoting, like you said, pivoting. What was your biggest source of inspiration? I'm just curious to, if you have any books, if you have any personality that really influenced you in the way you shaped your business today.
I think there's been multiple inspiration through the times at different levels. Right now, I would say my biggest source of inspiration, and I've listened to his podcast, read a lot about him, is Howard Schultz from Starbucks. Actually, he was a guy selling, bunch of stuff before joining Starbucks, and at Starbucks he was selling the machines and a bunch of other things, being in marketing inside, working at marketing, and then pave his way to become the CEO of Starbucks, and bought Starbucks actually back in the 80s. So So he's not the founder, but he went through that. And why I'm looking at this is because there's a period of time of Starbucks growing that is very important. Like the time they went IPO in, I think, late 80s to the beginning of the 90s, it took them about probably 10 to 12 years to develop massive amount of coffee shop, reshaping as well the coffee as we used to know before, and reshaping also the coffee shop. And I think that's fascinating how this guy, came from a background that was not almost like even coffee, and rebuild that whole, industry. And still today, I think, there's a lot of things to take good of it, and things also from those big business not to repeat, because we're seeing like some of the backlash now of some things that have been done that were not definitely like good moves. So having like someone in your industry that you can look up as your big star, actually, and for sure, I mean, there's other like smaller business that I'm also following the same industry that I look at the shape their way in. But right now, I would say that's what I look, and I look forward to really understand and master that industry. And maybe after that, I will be at another place where I'm gonna need like to have someone else to look up, because they would have done something different that will help me to get where I want to go.
It's true, and there's nothing wrong in looking at other people's mistakes, reading book, because that can save you. That $35 book can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So
yeah,
that's a very valuable advice. Phil, thank you so much for being on the pod today. If people want to go check out and have the best cup of coffee, and if they're in Canada, they can also buy it online, right?
Yeah,
they can
Canada, United States, we sell everywhere. In the North America.
So GothRider.ca for Canada, and you're also available in a lot of retail store now. So I would invite everybody to give it a try. And you're also pretty active on social media. I always see you on TikTok. So where can they follow you the best? Is it Instagram? Is it TikTok now? Where should they go?
I would say like mostly TikTok, because we're doing live every night, and also I try to put as much educational content as possible on coffee, answer questions, either a coffee or coffee machine or things like that. So right now most of the content is in French, but we will be starting like doing both language next year. So it's going to be mixed.
Awesome. Thank you once again for being on a pod, Phil, and I'll catch you hopefully very shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being part of the Up at Night family. If you've liked what you heard today, don't forget to rate, follow, subscribe, or leave me a comment below. New episodes of Up at Night drop every week. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. I'm Jeremiah Curvers. Until next time.